Oh, it's okay. I was just making it works. Just 30. That's the worst. It was 6:30. Am I good to go, you guys? Sure. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's my pleasure to call to order tonight's Tiburon Town Council meeting. It is September 20th. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Thier.
Yes.
Councilmember Wellner.
Here.
Vice Mayor Fredericks.
Here.
Mayor Ryan.
Here. Thank you. Before we get into the meat of the agenda, we offer an opportunity for members of the public to provide comment on things that are not on tonight's agenda. So we'll take anyone who'd like to speak on something that's not on tonight's agenda. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And first, Madam Clerk, could you give instructions to members of the public who are online?
If you're calling in on Zoom and would like to make a comment during this meeting, please use the raise hand feature of Zoom, which will indicate to me you'd like to make a comment. You can find the raise hand button on your webinar controls bar on the bottom of your Zoom window or smartphone screen. If you're using Zoom, I'll invite you to turn your camera and microphone on to address the council. Please accept the request from the Zoom host that being promoted to a panelist. If you're calling in using a phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand.
Thank you. And as is our custom, we would usually start with the people online after the people who are in their chambers. So if there's anyone in the chambers who'd like to make a comment, please come to the podium and state your name and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Feel free, please.
Yes, I'm Pamela McConnell Douglas of Tiburon, California. And this is my husband, Stephen Douglas. Yes, I have lived in Tiburon for 53 years. I attended Tamalpais High School, but something is not correct here. And I have tried to address the council about 100 different times, it seems like, and no one from the council have addressed my particular needs. But anyway, I, as an American Blackfoot Indian, and Irish, has been singled out. I raised my 2 children here. My daughter is 50. My son was 32. And the town did not bother my daughter, but they started in on my son when he was 3 years old by knocking on my door. The policemen scared the daylights out of me. They said that he put up a Nazi sign. I said, but he do not even know how to say his name. How can he put up a Nazi sign? And then it only got worse. They harassed my family. It's like every other day, every other week, the police. And then they started singling me out with 4 police cars watching my every move. And I can't help it. I'm upset. Why? I mean, I attended College of Marin with Robert Williams, the University of Hawaii with Obama as a child. Why keep bothering me? Why? And recently, I just wanted to go with my son. Someone murdered my 32-year-old son, murdered him. Why? It's like a couple of restaurants in town the burning my food, the spit on it, or whatever. But please stop the harassment. I forgot my age. I'm 73 years old, and I don't know if they're gonna kill me next. Who's gonna kill me?
Yeah, well, thank you for your comments. I appreciate you coming and speaking. Is there anyone else in the chambers that would like to speak on an item that's not on tonight's agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up.
Okay, great.
I'm Steve Douglas, my wife's husband, and I just want to say that I've watched my wife and I have lived at the Hillarita. She's been there a lot of years before me, but she's been struggling to get the front area on Tiburon Boulevard cleaned up because there's so many, fuselage from the eucalyptus trees falling in the drainage ditch, and there's standing water, and it's just really terrible there. And also there's a bus stop there that's so dilapidated. It's been, there for years. And we're kind of a little bit, surprised because I know down at Stewart Drive, they had the community there pitch in for a brand new bus stop that has solar panels and lighting. And we never hardly see any customers there, But in the Hillarita, there's lots and lots of senior citizens, and they come out there and there's not much lighting. And, I was hoping maybe we could write a letter or get some kind of a GoFundMe to help build a new bus stop for the Hillarita. And Pam's been, asking Caltrans to clean up the area, but they keep kicking the ball down the road. So we're just, that's what I want to say for now. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Yes, and there's a woman in the back who'd like to come speak. So you can come up to the podium and that would be better because then the audio will pick it up. And so if you can just state your name and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please, yeah.
Well, it's off the subject. I just wanted to bring this up because you're going to be talking about housing, affordable housing, and I happen to live in affordable housing. And there was an ordinance about 5-6 years ago for a non-smoking and apartment units that share walls, and it's been extremely unsuccessful where I live. And I came to ask if we could have a hearing or a meeting on how we can direct the owners of these properties to put more direction to their management to how to enforce this ordinance. It's not enforced. The police can't enforce it. The managers can't enforce it. So I live with a wall lining my apartment with smoke every morning in my bedroom. And I go there and they go call the police, We can't do anything. The police say, sorry, but we can't go in without a warrant. So we can't smell it if it's in the back. So it just goes round and round. And if we're going to be putting more affordable housing in, we're exposing children with asthma, we're exposing older people, we're exposing everybody to cancer causing cigarette smoke because there's no way to enforce it. And it's increased, not decreased, since we've had the ordinance. So I just wanted to say that. I hope we could have some meetings on that and some way to enforce that. It's really important.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for that. Could you let us know what your name is so we can follow up with you?
Oh, Barbara Warren.
Thank you, Barbara. Is there anyone else in the chambers who wants to speak on an item that's not on tonight's agenda? I'm seeing none. Madam Clerk, is there anybody online who'd like to speak?
Seeing none.
Okay, so I'll close that open public comment period. And now we'll move on to the consent calendar. Is there anybody on the council who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, are there any members of the public who'd like to comment on any of the items on the consent calendar? Want to hear anyone online?
Seeing none.
Great, so I'll close the public comment period. Is there anyone who'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second, all in favor of approving the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, great, so that passes 4-0. 4-0, interestingly, which I underscore because tonight is very exciting because we finally, after months and months and months, have another council member joining us. Our next item is presentation 1, the oath of office. Is there a staff report, please?
I don't have a staff report other than just to announce that by adoption on the consent calendar, the council has certified the results of the election and will be swearing in Councilmember-elect Isaac Nicklar.
All right. And I forget, how does that happen?
Raise your right hand for me. And you're gonna repeat after me.
Okay.
I, Isaac Nicklar,
I, Isaac Nickbar,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United
and the
States
Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and
against
domestic,
all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
All right.
Um,
Thank you.
Welcome, Councilmember Nick Farr. Before we move on, I'd like to take public comment on this item. Is there anyone in the chambers who would like to make public comment on this agenda item? Please, Mr. Hall Douglas.
The Constitution of California and the United States.
You're welcome. Is there anyone online who'd like to make a comment about this agenda item?
Seeing none.
Okay. Oh, is there someone who'd like to speak on this item? Yeah. And is there any discussion or comments from fellow council members?
I have one. So I just want to start off by saying welcome to Isaac. Isaac is someone who will serve this council very, very well. I strongly support Isaac. He has done how many years on the Parks, Open Space and Trails Commission? 7 years on the Parks, Open Space and Trails Commission. And he has admirably served. He has brought many issues forward, including our Parks Master Plan. He helped pass the IPM policy that we have today. And he's also been working with this beautiful family here who I have known since what, first grade? I think first grade. I don't even want to count the years, but since we first moved here. And I'm also very proud of how he has kept his commitments with his family, with all the sports. I'm not even going to name them. And I want to tell each and every one of you, to your wife, Jessica, and to the children, how lucky you are to have someone like this in your life. And I know that this town council is going to benefit greatly from his expertise and from the service. And to Isaac, I cannot wait to see what you do here. I just can't wait. So welcome.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Fredericks, please.
I would like to welcome you also. I look forward to you sharing the road and the load, and look forward to working together.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Wallner, please.
I also want to welcome you heartily to the council, and I just have a question, which is, what is Post going to do without you?
I don't know, big shoes to fill, right? And I'll just say that I'm pretty sure if you combine Isaac's November results with this most recent election, that he got more votes in a single calendar year than any Tiburon resident ever. And the probability of it actually ever being broken is a very slim. So this is a man whose message resonates with the voters, and that's great. So congrats on and welcome.
Thank you
Excited to
very
have
much.
Yes. So at this point, I will move on to public hearing or to presentation number 2. And this is the Marin Countywide Electric Vehicle Acceleration Strategy. Do I have a staff report on this?
I'm going to briefly just give a quick intro, then turn it over to Christina O'Rourke, who will give a presentation. As council knows, council passed a new climate action plan in 2022, which includes ambitious goals for greenhouse gas emissions. And as we also know, a large percentage of those greenhouse gas emissions are attributed to the transportation sector. So the town has also been working with its partners in the county, other Marin agencies, as well as the County of Marin, through Transportation Authority of Marin, and specifically the Marin Clean Energy Partnership, over the last few years, developing a strategy to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles. And tonight you're going to hear a presentation from the Marin Clean Energy Partnership lead, which is Christina O'Rourke, and she'll be wearing several hats tonight. But today she'll be giving you, or right now she'll be giving you a presentation on the EV acceleration strategy. Thanks, Christina.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, today for this agenda item, I'm here as the Sustainability Coordinator for the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership, giving a presentation on our countywide EV acceleration strategy, which MCEP developed with funding from the Transportation Authority of Marin. Our goal for this strategy is to support the climate action plans that all of our jurisdictions have adopted, as well as the EV targets that are embedded in those plans. It's really critical to meet those EV adoption targets in order to meet our long-term greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets. Our intent was to develop a plan that could be adopted or accepted by all jurisdictions. It's not a one-size-fits-all plan. It actually has a suite of actions that a jurisdiction can choose from, prioritize, and then determine what timeline they want to use in order to develop those actions. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide. So we, for our process to develop the strategy, we started with a subcommittee. We did quite a bit of outreach to stakeholders. We interviewed all of the staff at our jurisdictions, including public works staff, because they're going to be tasked with implementing a lot of these actions, including electrifying municipal fleets and installing EV chargers on public lands. We also reviewed other agencies' plans and guidance from state and regional agencies. We wanted to identify best practices that we wanted to be sure to include in the plan. We developed these guiding principles at the beginning of the planning process. I'll just highlight one, which is to focus government actions on those that most efficiently utilize public funds and resources. We recognize that there are a lot of state, federal, and regional funds and programs and incentives out there and more coming. So in some cases, the jurisdiction just really needs to support and promote those. There's also, a good momentum in the private market for EVs, and sometimes where the jurisdiction just needs to support the private market. This is a look at emissions countywide. More than half of our emissions come from the transportation sector. That's true for Tiburon as well, where it's 55%. And of those transportation emissions, 80% come from passenger vehicles. So it's really critical that we address passenger vehicles to meet our long-term targets. The plan focuses on passenger vehicles, but also addresses medium and heavy duty vehicles, particularly in municipal fleets, as well as e-bikes, bikes and scooters. The chart on the left is showing ZEV adoption rates. These charts have actually been refreshed from the ones that are in the strategy. We released the strategy in February, and the CEC published additional data since then. So this is also showing 2022 data. As of the end of 2022, there were almost 15,500 zero emission vehicles on the road. That was a 25% increase over the previous year. Countywide, we're at 8% of all registered vehicles are zero emission vehicles. And in Tiburon, it is at, I can't read that because I don't have my glasses on, 14%, I believe. The countywide rate is double the statewide rate, which is at 4%. So we're making good progress. We have a long way to go. These are the targets that are in our climate action plans. The ZEV adoption rates are generally between 25 and 45%. Tiburon, of course, is at the higher end of that with a goal to reduce emissions 50% below 1990 levels by 2030 and to have 45% of all registered vehicles in Marin County to be zero emission vehicles. So these charts are showing what it would take to get to 35%, that mid-range. So on the left, we need to have a year-over-year growth rate of 21% to get to that 35% adoption rate by 2030. We've been averaging 22% over the past 3 years, so we're kind of on track, although of course it gets harder to maintain growth rates as a market matures and numbers get larger. The graph on the right is showing what we need in Marin for our sales targets, ZEV sales targets versus the statewide targets. So the statewide is the bottom line, the lighter colored line, and that's taking into account the new state regulation that all new vehicles that are sold in California will have to be zero emission vehicles by 2035. So the state here is assuming that that's going to ramp up over time. Excuse me, the line on the top is what we need in Marin County in order to get to 35%. So essentially what I'm showing you here is that we need to do more than what the state is doing. Can't just rely on that state regulation or on state programs if we're going to meet our more aggressive targets. So according to the CEC, we have over 1,000 shared private or public chargers. A shared private charger is one that is at a workplace or a multifamily building, and the intended users for those chargers are employees and tenants. There's undoubtedly many more chargers that are in single family homes. We just don't have good data to support how many are actually out there. About 71% of housing units in Marin are single family homes. Here in Tiburon, it's 75%. So in a way, that market kind of takes care of itself because it's easier for an owner of a single family home to install a level 2 charger. The greatest need really is for those private chargers in multifamily buildings. And that's that yellow bar that's shown there in the graph on the right. So that is, we're making some progress installing multifamily chargers, but we need a lot more. This really does present an opportunity here to ensure that our new multifamily buildings are ready, that they have and charging capability or possibility for all of the tenants. Tiburon's already adopted an ordinance, a REACH code ordinance that will ensure that that happens. So that is good news.
Sorry, does the 4,000, does the scale on that represent the number of drivers served? Or
so that is no. So this is
number of chargers?
This is showing the number of chargers that are needed
Thanks.
by 2025. The interesting thing is that the number of chargers is to serve a population of ZEVs that we're actually already almost at. And you can see that we don't have that many chargers, even though we're serving that many people. So there's a little mismatch. I think because we do have so many chargers in single family homes that we're not counting. This is the need for multifamily.
Thanks.
So for charging needs, TAM did do a siting plan in 2019. This is a couple of years old now, and some of these sites have been built out. Essentially, where we need level 2 chargers or anywhere where cars kind of park for a long time and can charge, it takes about 8 hours on a level 2 to fully charge a battery. So those are places like shopping centers, school parking lots, also anywhere if a car is parked and then the occupant is taking another form of transportation to get to work, for example. So smart stations, ferry terminals, park and ride lots. Level 3 chargers can charge a vehicle usually in under an hour to fully charge a vehicle. And so those really are needed along transportation corridors, especially where it's kind of easy to pull off and pull back on. So if, for example, if a car is going a long distance and needs to do a charge quickly, but there's also real need to put these both level 2 and level 3 near multifamily buildings because it's possible, and we do see this, that tenants will go and charge their car, and they may even just, if it's in within walking distance, walk back to their unit while it's charging. So we looked at barriers to EV adoption, and we've listed those here. I won't go into all of them, but they're listed in the plan. Essentially, what we were trying to do is to make sure that we're addressing these barriers. Some of them are kind of working out now. EV range is getting better. Lack of vehicle availability is improving. But some of the other ones, like we do need more chargers. We certainly, there's still a lot of misinformation out there, misconceptions about EVs. So there are 36 actions in 4 areas. Again, our expectation here, it's not a one-size-fits-all plan. Our expectation is that the jurisdictions are going to select those actions that are relevant to the jurisdiction and then prioritize them and put a plan together to implement it. And we've provided a plan in the appendix for that purpose. So under the first action area is conduct robust community outreach and education. Here, there's a real opportunity for a town to simply use their existing communication channels, whether that might be newsletters or the website, to do webinars, to use social media in order to get the word out about a lot of things about EVs, promoting rebates and incentives. There's also countywide marketing campaigns that the town can help to promote and to work with. And there are nonprofits that the town can partner with as well, like Ride and Drive Clean, which provides webinars and drive and EV events. In the second area, which is accelerate public charging infrastructure, the first one the town has already done, which is to adopt that model breach code, identifying locations for public chargers and including those in capital improvement plans is also important so that there's a plan in place, and especially when there's funding available, that the town can take advantage of grants that may come about. The third area is to increase municipal fleet electrification. And here we're recommending that cities and towns adopt a fleet replacement policy with a goal to convert 100% of the fleet to EVs by the year 2030. Certainly isn't possible to do that now. Our fleets there's a lot of public works trucks that there just aren't availability, EV options, but those are coming online and hopefully will be available by 2030. And then the last area is to support and advocate for policy and funding that accelerates EV adoption. So for next steps, what we've been doing is asking all of our jurisdictions, councils to direct staff to either complete the work plan or to integrate that work plan into a regular planning process to select those actions and then to implement it, perhaps bring it back to council for approval. It really depends on the jurisdictions, what's best for the jurisdiction. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Does anyone on the council have a question for Scott?
I actually do.
Okay, great.
So with respect to the work plan itself, the implementation, how far are we out from landing on that?
From landing, I'm sorry.
On a work plan, on an actual work plan.
So, so the town hasn't started working on the work plan. I know you have a new climate action coordinator. It's a perfect thing for her to start doing.
Thank you.
I had a question. Are all of the municipalities adopting this plan? Or are you just asking, I know the staff report asks us to decide if we want to develop a work plan, but are you asking for adoption of the plan as well, or no?
No, we're not asking for adoption. This really is the first time that all the councils have had a chance to review the plan, and I think it takes some time. Originally, we were hoping that the staff would actually complete the work plan and bring it to the councils as well, and we just realized that that was too heavy of a lift. So at this point, just accepting the plan and then again, just integrating the work plan into your whatever climate action plan programming that you do.
Thank you. So at this point, I'll open it up to public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? Yeah, please, Mr. Douglas.
So measuring the pollution from this area, takes a measurement for how much Because there's a lot of electric vehicles in Tiburon already. And I'm just wondering about, you know, the buses and the delivery trucks add to all the pollution too, besides just the cars here. So I think that Tiburon is probably up there, you know, in the green zone compared to all other areas. So I just don't know where do we stand in that area?
Thank you. So just with the format of the meeting, we'll have to get back to you on the questions, but I appreciate that. Asking them. Yes, thank you. Is there anyone else in the chambers who'd like to make a comment on this agenda item? Anybody online, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we will start with Judy Stroyer.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you. And state your name and then.
Okay. Okay, my name is Jody Stroyer. And I'm calling to check in on the Marin here. This is a general comment about your process. Is that acceptable right now?
This would be time for comments on this specific agenda item. So if it's
Okay,
not related to the climate plan, then.
Okay, in order to discuss the climate plan, there's just you know, the background information on climate change is important to this discussion. Is that not relevant to you?
No, you can say that for sure.
Okay, well, it seems like the climate change happening in our country is kind of debatable, and it seems like we have a group of mostly very a minority group of people who have decided to make all of the assumptions for what is real science and what is you know, they call quackery, depending on, you know, what they believe. And it bothers me that this particular group is the one that gets to make those choices, because they're the ones also that forbid our questioning of other science. So when we have science and we should be able to question science and check the verification and facts of what we're being force fed. And just like climate, where there's another group of people who believe that this is all, you know, function of climate change just continues to happen, whether it's climate warming or cooling or whatever. And the reason is because it's mostly just natural cycles and solar flares and things. There are people who believe that, you know, and that's an example of, if you let one group decide what the real science is, and science is that it's this, and that anybody who questions that is shun and forbid. You know, it's very much akin to Europe, you know, most of Europe, and now more and more in our country, being force-fed the idea that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, when we know darn well that that's not the case. There have been proven studies showing that there was no Zyklon B used
That's
in those
definitely
rooms.
not part of the comment period.
This is not
That-
related.
Okay, well,
This is
the
not
idea
related to
is that you
climate
should be able to
change.
challenge science, okay?
Yeah,
And when you
not
have one
related
group
to
forcing
climate
it on you, okay.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Shore.
Yeah.
Next is Suzanne Mellon.
Yeah, sorry, that's downright offensive. Do we have anyone else, did you say?
Suzanne Mellon is joining.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, I'm going to make a comment right now
Yes.
before Susan speaks. I just want to say that in Tiburon, we don't tolerate anti-Semitism, we don't tolerate racism, and we don't tolerate that kind of hate speech. So I'm going to come out strong on this tonight, and I'm going to say that we are a community that accepts everybody, and we don't care what religion you practice, we don't care your orientation, we don't care about anything else except you're welcome here in Tiburon, and we're not going to allow people to shut down our meeting. So to the caller that just talked, You're out of order, you're inappropriate, and this kind of speech is not welcome in Tiburon.
Thank you, Councilmember Thur. Ms. Mellon,
Hi, yeah,
welcome.
thank you for that. Thank you. Just quickly, I just want to support implementing a program to adhere to the Marin electronic vehicle strategic plan. And I already sent an email into that effect, but I guess I don't see how we're going to meet the cap goals without implementing this plan. And it would just be really nice to see other cars on the road besides Teslas, you know, like, and I think it's great that the plan has made it a priority to widen the charging infrastructure and opening up the opportunity to own EVs to lower income people and communities of color. And so that everyone can partake in this very important step towards full electrification. And like to see more Leafs and Bolts on the road, or whatever, all the other cars that they're coming out with that we're going to see on the road in the next few years. So it's very exciting. And I just encourage you all, I support you 100% in implementing the EV plan. That's all I want to say. And thank you for bringing this up and doing all this. It's a wonderful thing.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate the comment.
Bye.
Next is Leonard Frank.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Frank. Welcome.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can, yes.
All right, perfect. My big question tonight is why are rabbis allowed to suck baby penis in a ritual known as
Okay, can we cut him off, please?
Yeah, can you
Thank
cut
you.
that off? That's
So-
inappropriate.
So look, can we just adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes here? Because I don't want any of this to continue, and this is just toxic, right? And I'm happy to speak to the people here who have come to spend their time
Yeah.
here.
We're going to continue the meeting, not
fuck
adjourn.
niggers, fuck Jews, fuck
Yeah.
niggers, fuck Jews. Gas the kikes.
We.
Oh, I'm a panelist. I can unmute
5-minute
myself.
break.
Recess, yeah,
Let's take
5-minute
a
Why are
recess.
Jews allowed to suck baby penis?
yeah, thanks.
So you're off topic.
So we have to listen to them start.
Right, and then once they say something.
Yeah, there's no question.
Yeah,
Of course.
Yeah.
so does that make sure they
Holly? Yeah.
Never happened before.
But no one has addressed my paperwork for years. Why haven't you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you send emails to us, with all of us together, we can't respond. If we don't, we can't have conversations about city business together on email outside of the context of a public meeting. Yeah, we read what we get. No. Right. No, I've seen that. Any guns? Well, we respond when there's kind of a city business item. I don't
What I think so. But no one has ever in years. Oh, I did that, yeah. Well, you know, most of us are really busy and we don't know.
They also have staff that
They don't
respond
know
to their
what you're
power.
talking about.
We're all volunteers.
Don't know why you call. It's in fine print what I'm talking about. It's in fine print what I'm talking about.
These days it's
But
mostly
I,
email.
you know, as an American citizen, I don't think that. You guys that call.
I just read, it's like a novel, but it's a documented history of the first ambassador to Germany just when Hitler was. And
Is this a new book or one that's been in existence for a while?
I think it's relatively new. I started with the history of that of Cold War, because it's so.
So bad.
And I said, why are you just talking about it? You say it enough, somebody's gonna believe it.
Oh, no, she sent in a letter.
I thought it was bad enough with the climate change denial.
Yeah, seriously, jump the shark. So can we? Yeah. So thank you, everybody, for your patience. I appreciate that, and I'm sorry about that. We're going to continue. We have one more member of the public who wants to speak on this item.
Jenny Silva.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to support what you're doing in terms of the electrification, but also really encourage Tiburon to look beyond electrification of cars to address its reduction in emissions. Transit and bike infrastructure are really, really important tools electrification doesn't solve the traffic issues that many residents complain about. Getting people out of cars does. And so I just encourage you to do all that you can in that regard also. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And so I'll close public comment period now. Is there any further comments from the council before we move on? And seeing none on that item, on that presentation. It is, there's no action that we're contemplating, so we can discuss it and comment, but.
So I just wanted to make a short comment that I think I speak for all of us when I say we support the staff's work on this issue.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember Wellner.
And I just want to reiterate what has been a longstanding and growing policy of the council and of the town to address the issue of climate change head on. We have one of the most aggressive and exciting sustainability plans for a town of our size. It's ambitious. We intend to reach those goals. What the county is doing is very helpful, and I'm confident that we'll come up with an aggressive, supportive plan to encourage the use of EVs and to improve charging at multifamily facilities in our town. So anything we can recommend in terms of bringing to a future agenda these kinds of measures, in specific measures for Tiburon, we're eager to see what the sustainability coordinator and town staff are able to propose.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Thier. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I just want to talk about how excited I am about the Marin countywide EV acceleration strategy. Right now, 52% of emissions of GHG emissions in Tiburon are transportation. Our CAP, that's our climate action plan, has goals that are very ambitious to try to reduce the GHG emissions 50% by 2030. And one of the fastest ways that we can do that is by prioritizing the transportation sector. And if we are able to achieve 45% of registered passenger vehicles being zero emission vehicles, we would be able to reduce 6,340 metric tons of CO2e. So what makes me super excited is that within this plan, I really believe if we could accelerate the public charging infrastructure and get more EV chargers in, I do agree with our consultant on many, many different things, Christine, that, it's really the multifamily and it's in the workplaces, because that's where people cannot just put an EV charger in like they can in their house. I'm very excited about this because right now, this is a way for us to develop the plan. And my comments back to staff are that we should definitely develop the work plan as it is presented in Appendix A of the strategy. And, my priorities on the actions would be to accelerate the public charging infrastructure as fast as we can, get as many in as we can. And I'm very excited that our sustainability, that we have a sustainability coordinator now, which is amazing. We have half of one that we're sharing with Mill Valley. And I think that's going to go a long way to help us reach our climate action plan goals. So this is a report that I'm super excited about.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to echo Councilmember Thier's comments about, I think this is a really exciting program. We're headed in the right direction. I think there's also something that I would love to see. I think it might be a separate initiative, but the electrification of public transit, I think, is a really important step for the county. There's a really exciting pilot that I've been following on Treasure Island called the Loop. It's a self-driving electric vehicle that just basically does this loop around Treasure Island, zero emissions, and it just operates and stops and goes. It's in pilot phase right now, but it's something for us to, I think, as a county to think about, because it can be reliable and it can be dialed up or dialed down depending on need. without impacting operating costs too heavily.
Yeah, thank you. Vice Mayor Fredericks, please.
So just a piece of information, I was actually at a TAM sponsored EV workshop for all the agencies in the Bay Area. And at that particular meeting, I learned that Marin Transit is now in negotiations for land in which to install chargers for their electric buses.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Christine. I appreciate it. And now we'll move on to the first action item, which has to do with the Angel Island Tiburon Ferry Grant. Do we have a staff report for this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Mayor and council members and members of the public. This item relates to a request by the Angel Island Tiburon Ferry Company for the town to submit a grant application on their behalf to assist Angel Island Ferry in meeting new emissions rules that were recently adopted by the California Air Resources Board, or CARB. Just a little bit of background. As folks know, Angel Island Tiburon Ferry has been a local family-owned business operating in Tiburon since 1959. They don't just run to Angel Island. They also provide a variety of other marine-related excursion trips, whale watching, sunset cruises, etc. And they currently operate 3 vessels: the motor vessel Angel Island, the Bonita, and then the third one is their Tamalpais motor vessel. In December 22, the California Air Resources Board adopted amendments to California code, which in essence requires companies like Angel Island Ferry that run what are called in-use short-run ferries to have those vessels be zero emissions by the end of 2025, which is very aggressive. And I've included as Exhibit 1 a sort of summary sheet about those regulations. At the same time, CARB offers funding to help folks meet these new requirements, and in July of 2023 released a grant solicitation for what's called the Advanced Technology Demonstration and Pilot Project Program related to marine operations, and I included a copy of the grant solicitation as Exhibit 2. To summarize, to meet the standards that they will have to meet, Angel Island Ferry has teamed up with a company called Green Yachts of San Rafael in developing a plan to have all their vessels meet these requirements. And they have asked the town to submit a grant on their behalf for funding to help meet those goals. This particular grant opportunity is only eligible for public entities and nonprofit organizations to apply for. And it's been a grant program that's been in place for quite a while, and it's fairly routine for public entities to apply for these demonstration funds, and those monies would pass through to private entity like Angel Island. I won't go through each element of their plan, but basically it's 4 components. The first 3 relate to vessels themselves. The first 2 are conversion of existing vessels to electric propulsion. So the Angel Island, the boat, sort of everybody associates with Angel Island Ferry, the green square boat, would be converted from a diesel propulsion to electric propulsion. The same would go for their smaller vessel, the Bonita. The third project related to vessels is actually selling the existing Tamalpais vessel and designing and having built a brand new electric vessel. And then the fourth component relates to infrastructure changes needed on the dockside to accommodate charging infrastructure. So there are 4 distinct components that they're seeking to ask for money from this grant for. And if we don't know the exact amount that will be asked for, but if all 4 were awarded, it'd be close to $18 to $19 million in funding. If the town agrees to apply for and is awarded funds, we would be required to enter into a grant agreement with CARB. And I've attached a sample of that agreement as Exhibit 4 to the staff report. As part of this, as grantee, the town would be taking on the responsibility for essentially administering this grant, which would be a fairly long-term and lengthy process. And we would be eligible for up to 8% of the grant amount to get reimbursed for the cost of that project administration. If the council authorizes staff to submit the grant, and again, we are awarded, our plan would be to hire a third party to do that project administration, and likely an engineering firm that has history of monitoring large public works grants projects. And we've had initial discussions with our current contract engineer, John Moe Engineering, and they are very interested in providing that service if we were to be awarded a grant. in terms of fiscal impact, in theory, if the grant is awarded, there wouldn't be any direct cost to the town. All costs associated with administering the grant would be reimbursed. And we would be sort of acting as a pass-through, more or less, to accommodate or to get the projects completed and monitoring those projects for completion. There is no reimbursement for costs associated with developing the grant, however, so that the town is devoting some staff time to assisting Angel Island Ferry in putting the grant together. And if approved by council this evening, we would help them finish the grant application, which is due on October 12th. Those costs are not reimbursable, but once the grant is awarded, all staff time and project oversight time would be reimbursed. There may have been a mix-up tonight, and unfortunately in my communications, I expected someone from Angel Island Ferry to be here. I think they thought it was at the last meeting, and then they showed up and I told them it'd be at the next meeting, so I apologize for that. But I'd be happy to answer any questions council has.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions for staff? Vice Mayor Fredericks, please.
So I understand that the state law that requires this applies to short haul ferries because of the disproportionate greenhouse gas emissions that those trips generate.
I think that's part of it, but also vessels that operate on short runs, 3 miles or less, or tend to be smaller, and the conversion of those vessels is probably slightly less expensive than a larger vessel that's operating 20 or 30 mile trips. So.
And do we have a sense yet from any of the consultants what the pool of funding is, and just what the probability of actually getting funding is in a small ferry company like this?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Angel Island Ferry, but my understanding after having several conversations with both folks from Angel Island Ferry as well as Green Yachts, that it's almost assured that they will get some funding under this program. There are very few vessels that fit the criteria for portions of the funding. This electric propulsion conversion of short run ferries. There simply aren't that many short run ferries out there in the bay. So Angel Island Ferry is very unique in that the length of its run is very short from Tiburon to Angel Island.
So the probability is increased by the fact that there are fewer applicants.
Yeah. They're very confident they will receive some funding under this program.
Any other questions? You said there were 4 phases, and I assume they're sort of sequential, like there's no way we would be awarded phase 4 of developing the new vessel without proceeding with the first 3 phases of electrifying the existing ones first, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little hard to know. I mean, I can't speak for CARB, but sure. I mean, why would they approve infrastructure improvements if they're not going to convert any vessels, right? So, in talking to Angel Island Ferry and Green Yachts, it seems likely that components 1, 2, and 4 are the highest, likelihood of success. Having a new vessel designed and built probably is a reach.
Yeah.
But
okay, thanks. So at this point, I'll open it up to public comment. So if anyone has a comment on this specific agenda item, sorry, John, do you have a question?
I did have a question. I was having trouble sort of formulating it, but so can you describe what, if any, of the grant funds wind up going to I mean, the city gets reimbursed for administration of the grants, but the grant funds, I mean, the ferry company is a private for-profit company, I presume.
Yes.
And so the grant funds are designed to go to for-profit companies to help them improve their equipment to make it less polluting.
Correct.
So there's no requirement that it be a nonprofit or anything like that. It's understood that these are for-profit companies.
That's exactly right.
From these funds.
We asked that question directly to the folks at CARB when we've been on some of the calls. And the reason for it, at least the way I understand it, is this particular grant program is meant to be demonstration projects and pilot projects in terms of introducing new technology.
Right, to show the way for other companies to do the same.
Exactly. So,
okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I understood. Yeah. So, and in terms of the work on the dock, what is the status of dock ownership? That's currently owned by AC?
No, this dock would be the dock that's actually owned by Angel Island Ferry.
Okay, so it's a
So the
dock.
boats that they
own.
dock at, or the dock where they dock their boats is
They
owned
own.
by Angel
Okay,
Island
all
Ferry.
right, thank you.
Thank you. So is there anyone at this time who'd like to make a comment on this agenda item who's in the chambers with us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, do we have anyone online who'd like to speak on this item?
Seeing none.
Okay, I'll close the public comment period and bring it back to the council for discussion. Does anyone have any discussion or?
If I may just add one thing, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just want to be clear that tonight we're only asking council to authorize us to submit a grant application on the behalf. If awarded funds, we would return to council at a future meeting where you would formally accept the grant and authorize disbursement of funds.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it. So if there's no discussion, that would be the motion I would be looking for.
So I would make the motion to authorize staff to submit the grant application.
Second.
All right, all in favor, just say aye.
I
Aye.
would like to make a comment though, but.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, please.
Good
Oh, sorry,
conversation.
sorry.
No, it's quite all right. It's quite all right. And
Is this where I say the ship has sailed?
no,
Sorry, go ahead. Make your
that's
comment, please.
good.
Thank you.
That's a good singer. I just want to say that I'm excited about this grant opportunity and I think it's exactly the kind of thing we should be supporting. So I think it's an interesting kind of structure. I'm glad the town manager sort of helped explain why it's set up the way it is, but I would love to see Tiburon be a community that has a non-emitting short haul ferry to Angel Island. I think that's incredibly cool and I would love to see that happen. So thank you.
Maybe long haul one someday too.
That's right. Councilman Ruthier?
Yeah, I was just gonna add on and echo those comments. I think this is a win-win opportunity for the town and also to help a small family-owned business. I don't see Angel Island Tiburon Ferry here tonight, but they do bring a lot of great things to the community, the whale watches, the sunset cruises, the private charters. And this is a family that's been working really, really hard to keep this business in the family. And, I really feel like we're doing good here. We're helping them out because, to convert a boat and to buy new boats, that's a huge capital cost. And if we as a town can apply for a grant, have a fiscal agent, and then have zero emission ferries by 2025, we are going to be one of the farthest advanced in terms of climate and a climate action plan in all of Marin County. So I'm very excited about this.
Yeah.
And I think it's one step to
And-
reach our climate goals.
The ferry itself will become an attraction. Like people will be interested in riding the solar ferry.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a great compliment to the rest of our efforts for sure. So I will retake the vote just to make sure all in favor of the motion, say aye. None opposed. So that passes 5-0. Thank you.
And I also do want to commend staff. I know that Greg has been working, our town manager is Greg Chanis. He's been working on this for a really long time. And I know that it has, it's difficult to figure out how to do these things because it involves money and private companies. And so I just want to commend you on your work and getting us to this point.
Yeah, thanks. So at this time, we'll move on to action item 2, which is talk about considering approval of an RGS agreement. Do we have a staff report on this?
Very brief, Mr. Mayor. As I've discussed with council several times in the past, we're experiencing some staffing challenges in our admin department, which have been ongoing. And earlier this year in June, I entered into a professional service agreement with an entity called Regional Government Services Authority that provides staffing for public entities of limited duration. Since that agreement, when I signed the agreement at the time, it was anticipated that the value of the contract would be less than my signing authority, which is $60,000 for individual contract. So that original agreement was $36,000. Since then, we've experienced some new challenges regarding staffing in that department, and we anticipate the need to have regional government services continue to assist us for longer than we had expected. When we looked at the anticipated amount of that time, it was clear it was going to exceed my signature authority. So tonight, I'm asking council to authorize the town manager to execute an amendment to that original professional services agreement with Regional Government Services Authority, revising the scope of work and adjusting the not to exceed contract amount to $115,000. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. Vice Mayor Fredericks, please.
So the $115,000 covers the salary of the employee?
It doesn't cover the salary, so we're essentially hiring a consultant on an hourly basis to assist us. And they're acting as, they're sort of taking the interim role of one of our positions. So we're not paying full-time, it's not a full-time salary, it's an hourly basis, you know, based on what we predict the level of effort that'll be required.
And does this include any charges? Are they recruiting for us also?
Are they, excuse me?
Are they recruiting full-time and placement?
So this is a separate, regional government services is not assisting us in recruiting. I've entered into a different contract with a separate consulting company to help us with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Great. So at this point, I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody in the chambers who'd like to make a comment on this agenda item? I see none. Anybody online who'd like to speak on this agenda item?
Seeing none.
Okay, I'll close public comment period and bring it back to council for discussion and a potential authorization motion.
I would just move to authorize the town manager to sign the amendment to the professional agreement for administrative support.
Second.
Any comments before I ask for the vote? Okay, all in favor of approving that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And at this point, we'll move on to the public hearing. It's public hearing 1. And it's an amendment to the 2023-2031 housing element. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, we do, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and council members and the public. I first want to take one moment to introduce who we have kind of a long table tonight. So we've invited a lot of people to help us through this. To my left, I have the De Novo Planning Group, Steve McMurtry and Christina Irwin. And then I have Christina O'Rourke and Associates, who's been drafting the housing element, the general plan, working throughout this 2.5, almost 3-year process. And Mary Wagner from the town attorney's office, who's been helping us as well. So with that, I'm going to start my presentation. So what we're asking you tonight is to consider adoption of a resolution amending the 2023-31 housing element of the general plan 2040. So I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible, but I do believe it's important to sort of lay the foundation for some people that may not have been at meetings for the last couple of years. But as we all know, the government code does require us to adopt and maintain a general plan, and that a general plan contains 7 elements, one of which is the housing element that you are here to consider adoption of a resolution to amend that 2023-2031 housing element. And the housing element is a bit different than other required elements of the general plan because it must first be submitted to a state agency for review and certification. Not first, but it must be submitted. And as I've been saying, the town did initiate this process for the update of the general plan in the fall of 2020. And then we went through a large number of public hearings and outreach and hearings before the Planning Commission and the general and the town council. And on May 22nd, 2023, the town council held a public hearing and adopted resolution number 26-2023, adopting the general plan 2040, which includes the 2023 to 2031 housing element. And what this updated housing element does is identify sites to accommodate the town's RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, of 639 units. And then on May 31st, staff submitted that adopted housing element to the State Department of Housing and Community Development. And that is the state agency that I referred to earlier that needs to review this document. After we had submitted this, we did meet with HCD on July 1st and July 19th, 2023. And based on these discussions, staff revised the housing element and released the revised housing element. That means we posted it on the website. We sent out notices to interested parties. And we did also advertise that had been released in Tip Talk and in the paper on July 20th, 2023. Subsequently, staff had a follow-up meeting with HCD on July 27th, and additional revisions were made as a result of that discussion, and those were posted on the town's website that day. So based on the discussions with HCD, we made some revisions to the housing element programs. Those are to facilitate and promote accessory dwelling unit development, identify additional opportunity sites, rezone 4576 Paradise Drive, facilitate and promote the SB9 development and the inclusion of new programs entitled Permit Processing Timeline and Review. And we made revisions to the affirmatively furthering fair housing matrix and additional programs addressing housing mobility. And all of these can be found in Exhibit 3, and they are redlined in that document for you. Then on July 28th, 2023, the additional comments that were received from HCD were also changes to address third-party comments related to Site H, which is the site on Paradise 4576, and potential constraints to development, such as water, sewer availability, emergency services, including access to water and ephemeral streams. HCD also requested that the town revise the program to rezone 4576. And that program would revise so that we would establish development standards to accommodate the unit capacity. Staff has addressed these concerns, and then we revised the draft and posted the revised draft on August 8th, 2023. These revisions, which staff made, were in response to the July 28th comment letter. And they included additional information on housing sites, availability of sewer, water, fire protection service, and further protection of special status plant and animal species. In addition, HCD requests that we provide additional information to support development of Site H, and staff has provided supporting documentation of the conditions of the site, such as slope, biological constraints, utilities, and fire protection. We have provided, you can see these changes on pages 69 and 70 and 88 and 90 of the draft housing element that is Exhibit 4 and attached to the staff report tonight. On August 23rd, the Planning Commission held a public hearing to look at these changes and modifications and adopted a resolution recommending that the town council adopt the proposed amendments as you see in your draft housing element with the following changes. That we add information to the description of Site H about water supply infrastructure that may need to be extended. In response to this recommendation from the Planning Commission, if the council would like to add this language, staff is proposing the following underlined text be added to the second paragraph under the utilities section on page 89. And what you see is the underlined sentence that we recommend, which is a future project on Site H may be required to implement site-specific and limited offsite improvements to the water distribution system in order to serve the planned development. Planning Commission also requested that the town council consider adding language with respect to public engagement and to the description with respect to Site H on page 90. As directed by the commission to work with Commissioner Tsai to arrive at the proposed text, which you'll find here underlined. I think it's rather long to go through each one, but it is provided in your staff report. I believe it's on page 3. And after consideration of the resolution and in light of concerns around development of Site H, the Planning Commission recommended town council also consider additional units downtown and ADUs as a way to and as a means to fulfill the town's RHNA. During the public comment period, as well as through written correspondence, there was concern regarding traffic safety, existence of ephemeral streams, and a suggestion to consider replacing Site H with Site J, which is at 2270 Paradise Drive. In response to these concerns, staff directed De Novo Planning Group that drafted our environmental report to prepare a memorandum confirming that we considered the vehicles and people resulting from the Site H development, and it was accounted in our traffic modeling for the General Plan 2040, and it was included in the EIR, and you can see that in Exhibit 7. With respect to the ephemeral streams, De Novo Planning Group visited the site, performed an on-site analysis to document existing conditions, and prepared an attached report that you'll find in your staff report, Exhibit 8, confirming the existence of 2 ephemeral streams on Site H. The location, description, and additional information related to the streams is found within that attachment. Finally, members of the public have suggested that the town consider replacing Site H with Site J, which is at 22-7 Paradise, which is currently located outside the town's jurisdictional boundaries. And we did receive an application yesterday for the pre-zoning. The application has not been deemed complete. The remaining action that the town needs to ensure that the inventory of the sites in the housing element provides the capacity to accommodate the town's RENA at all income levels is to rezone Site H from RPD to R3-10. Because the town did not receive certification of the housing element from HCD by May 31st, 2023, the town now has 1 year from the statutory deadline to adopt the housing element. That is until January 31st, 2024, to complete the rezoning. Housing element law does provide an opportunity for a 1-year extension of the time to complete the rezonings. And those details for the extension are provided on page 6 of your staff report. If the town would like to pursue an extension of the deadline for the rezoning of Site H, they should direct staff to agendize the item as a public hearing for consideration at a future meeting. With respect to CEQA, which is important here, on May 22nd, the town council adopted a resolution number 25-2023, and they certified the final environmental impact report. And adopting the CEQA findings of fact and adopting a statement of overriding consideration and adopting a mitigation and monitoring reporting program. Furthermore, no supplemental or subsequent EIR is required for the proposed amendments to the 2023 to 2031 housing element because none of the circumstances requiring a supplemental or subsequent EIR exist. No substantial changes are proposed in the project, which will require major revisions of the previous EIR due to the involvement of a new significant environmental effects or a substantial increase in severity of the previously identified significant effects. The changes proposed in the housing element do not create any additional environmental impacts, and it's described in Exhibit 5 to the staff report. It's a memorandum finding of consistency with the general plan. Second, no substantial changes have occurred with respect to the circumstances under which the project has been undertaken. The General Plan 2040 EIR was certified in May 2023, and there's no substantial evidence that has been submitted showing any change in the circumstances applicable to that project. No new information of substantial importance, which was not known and could not have been known with the exercise of reasonable diligence at the time the previous EIR was certified as complete, has been submitted to the town. While you have been provided extensive correspondence has been received, the town received that cites publicly available documents in the relation to Site H. All this information was known and available as public documents when the General Plan 2040 EIR was certified in May. Do you want to talk now? Town Attorney Mary Wagner would like to add some comments.
Thank you. And Mayor Ryan, members of the council, I just wanted to add a few additional thoughts related to CEQA. You received a late mail item today from Peter Prowse, alleging some new impacts that that are allegedly not adequately addressed in the EIR. And I just want to take a moment to provide you some additional information in response to that letter. The first claim is that the EIR did not study language that's been added to the housing element. Specifically on page 70 of the housing element, you'll see some red line changes that describe special status plant or animal species or their habitats, riparian habitat, and other sensitive natural communities. This information is a summary of what's included in your draft EIR. So this was already analyzed and is included in your draft EIR, specifically pages 3.3, 27 to 28. In addition, the general plan policy OS.C that's referenced in the letter was also referenced in the provisions in the draft EIR, in addition to a number of other mitigating factors that are all included in the draft EIR. There's a lot more discussion again about ephemeral streams and wetlands, and I think that there's been a great deal of information put into the record. You have your consultants here from De Novo who did an actual site visit to field truth the facts and compare them to the documents that are related or that are available online. And they provided you with the information about why they believe that some of that information may be conflicting, and they're available to answer any questions as well. An additional issue was raised concerning a potential scenic impact related to the existing zoning for Site H, which is somewhat circular. And a couple of points here. First, scenic impacts don't mean you can't see it. There's a definite defined criteria that you utilize to look at those types of impacts. The other important thing to remember is even though there's a brief or an excerpt of a statement of purpose of what the current zoning district is for, this site is proposed in the housing element to be rezoned to the R310. And that same statement of purpose doesn't apply to that zoning district. And I think that concludes my comments related to the late mail you received.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. And finally, what we're here today is for your recommendation, but we are holding a public hearing. We would like to take public testimony, and we are asking you to adopt a resolution amending the 2023 to 2031 housing element of the general plan 2040. And with that, myself and the team here are available for questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the council that would like to pose questions? Please, Vice Mayor Fredericks.
Staff Member Tassini, you made a mention of the fact that if the town council wants to, another meeting can be had to extend the deadline. What are the circumstances we would consider if we wanted to figure out whether we wanted to extend the deadline?
If I may, Councilmember Fredericks, take the first stab at that one.
Sure.
So the statutory requirements for requesting an extension of the deadline for the rezoning, I just want to be clear, it's not an extension of the deadline to adopt your housing element. It's an extension of the deadline to undertake the rezonings that are necessary and identified in the housing element to provide the capacity to meet the RHNA. One of the factors is that you have to have rezoned 75% of the properties that are identified for lower income households. And there's some other factors as well. And if you would like me to, I can pull those up for your consideration. They are listed in your staff report. I would also like to just let you know that we've looked into this issue to see if jurisdictions have actually been granted such an extension, and we were not able to find any in our research. But if the council wanted to consider asking or providing justification for an extension of the zoning deadline, we would recommend that you agendize that for future consideration.
Thank you. And yes, I wasn't asking about the conditions precedent for thinking about extending the deadline. I was really not clear on why we would want to extend the deadline.
Any other questions for staff? Actually, could you just, when you were addressing the Prowse claims number 3, you talked about the statement of purpose. Can you just repeat that again? I didn't get that full implication.
Sure. So there's a contention that development of site H would conflict with existing zoning governing scenic quality, and that could be a significant aesthetic impact under CEQA. And then the claim is that the existing zoning for site H, which is RPD, in part states that one of its purposes is to protect and preserve open space. And it goes on to then say.
I see,
and-
but it would be a different zoning designation, so that statement of purpose wouldn't apply to it.
Right, and this is only an excerpt as well. It does go on to state, and balance that against the utilization of the property for housing. And then, as you indicated, this property is proposed for rezoning to R310, which has a different statement of purpose, including development of multifamily housing.
Thank you. You did say that. I should have gotten that. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, I think you said this earlier, but the language that the planning commission proposed is in the would be included in the recommendation if we followed the recommendation.
So the draft housing element that you have in your packet tonight does not include the changes that were proposed by the planning commission. Those are identified in your staff report.
Yeah.
So if the town council wished to include some or all of those, you would need to include that direction in your motion.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions for staff right now? No. So at this point, I'll open it up to public comment. If there's anybody in the chambers who'd like to speak, please, sir, come on forward. Yep, come forward to the podium and you can state your name. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And
my name is Bo Giannini, and just a simple question. I heard what you described, but I didn't really understand it. So can you explain to me? I know that there are some objections to Lot H. Is the conclusion that regardless of the objections, the town's position is that it's still suitable to move forward? So can you explain sort of what's the summation of everything that you just described?
thank you. And we'll, to the extent that you ask questions here, we'll try to answer them in deliberations or have staff answer them later. Is there anybody else in chambers who'd like to make a comment on this item? Please come forward. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Beth Gassel and I'm a resident at 4505 Paradise Drive. I'm also a member of the committee for Tiburon, which is a group of more than 100 concerned residents who got together over the primary concern of the development of Site H and the impacts it would have on our neighborhood. I feel like we're at a critical juncture in our housing element tonight. I've been attending these meetings regularly. And last June, when the town agreed it should conduct an ADU survey to gauge community interest, I felt like we were on the right track. Even more so when the town invited our committee to assist with this effort. Councilman Wellner, you told us it would be a heavy lift to get 165 expressions of interest or people interested in building, which is what we needed to replace the 92 units that are slated for Site H. I spent weeks this past summer alongside my neighbors and our committee doing mailings, hanging door hangers, and spreading the word that Tiburon would consider embracing ADUs as a viable solution to our housing element. I was inspired this could be a viable solution that doesn't burden just a few neighborhoods with traffic, noise, safety, and environmental issues. Our committee was absolutely thrilled when Tiburon residents overwhelmingly responded with 259 homeowners expressing interest in building 359 units, JADUs and ADUs combined. Even more amazing, when we mapped the response geographically, it showed a perfect display of gentle density across our entire peninsula. Gentle density is consistent with how our town has developed over the last 40 years and how our community has now spoken up how it would like to be developed in the future. You can substitute ADUs to meet our town's projected numbers and make the case to HCD that these sites are available and suitable and will be built over the next 8 years. You could self-certify this solution tonight. What was the whole point of the ADU fire drill if no one is responding to what our community is asking? Many towns across Marin are using ADUs as a viable option and self-certifying for HCD. Tiburon says it wants to keep local control and avoid builder's remedy. I'm pleading with you to please take control tonight and don't proceed with Site H when we know it's unsafe for the residents who already live here, not to mention unsuitable to build on. It was a mistake when the town agreed to include Site H in its housing element. It's okay to change course in the 11th hour. Will the ADU route require hiring more staff by the town for permitting and approvals? It will. Is it quick and easy to Is it a quick and easy answer to this housing mandate? It is not. But this is the future of our peninsula. What was the point of the entire ADU outreach campaign if the town is not listening to the community's input? If we don't course correct tonight, we will be discussing Site H for the next 10 years, only to find out the town was correct in its initial assessment that only a maximum of 4 homes should or could be developed in this location. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Gazelle.
Just gonna pass out some reports for.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you for your time this evening. I'm Tom Strutman. I'm a member of the committee, but I'm also the president of the Paradise Cay Homeowners Association, which represents approximately 160 homes. And adjacent to that, we have 2 other neighborhoods. So we have a total of 233 homes, about 600 people. And one of the things that we're concerned about is safety, and that has to do with fire. And one of the pieces that came back that you have a document on that describes the amount of capacity that's in your current system. There's 2 tanks, there's lots of pipes. There's a requirement to have a certain amount of flow to support 93 units. So we hired an engineering firm to do a study to determine what that would be. And they're a firm that's been in business since 1957. They have offices in 5 states in the West. They specialize in water management. They have a lead engineer who wrote our report was a registered professional engineer in the state of California, and a Cal Poly graduate in 1979. So to be quick, the conclusion is there is not enough capacity there currently. It's around the calculation at best is 1,028 gallons per minute. And the current existing homes that are there require 1,500. So it's already deficient. And adding an additional 100,000 square feet, which would be 93 units at 1,000 square foot apiece, would require 1,750 gallons per minute. So the net of it is there's not enough capacity in the system to support any additional development in that area. And that it's even worse if you had a fire, you're going to be even more deficient because you don't have enough capacity to take care of what you have. So, we're concerned about safety. We have about 600 residents, and, we're in a high fire district according to the town. And we believe that site is not buildable. It's not safe. Thank you.
Thank you for comments, Mr. Strutman.
Yeah, and you can read the report. So there's more in there.
Thank you. Yes. All right. Is this also something we received electronically?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Darren Rishwain, and our family has lived on Old Landing Road for the past 10 years. I have sent numerous emails regarding this topic of Site H in the past. I would first like to state that I find it very frustrating that our committee and Paradise Drive neighborhoods have had to go to such lengths to get attention of our town and engage our experts at our own expense to conduct research regarding the actual buildable capacity of Site H. This should have been evaluated and completed months ago, but our town staff declined to complete this task before adding Site H to the general plan, and they've refused to do so ever since, claiming nothing can be evaluated without an actual development application. That's ridiculous. Developers make such evaluation every day before deciding whether to submit an application. Staff tell you at the same time, without any support, that 93 units can be built on the site. They can't have it both ways. The report I've handed out is correspondence 29, a feasibility analysis from an engineer and project manager at CSW Stuber-Stroh Engineering Group, Michael Vidra. I'm sure you all know that CSW is the foremost engineering consulting firm in Marin County. Of importance, Mr. Vidra reports, there are 4 ephemeral streams and culverts which feed them located on site H, not 2. According to Tiburon's general plan, there must be a 100-foot setback from each bank of these environmentally sensitive streams. In order to develop 93 units on site H without building in the setbacks, 4 thin towers standing 13 stories tall, each would need to be constructed, with 8 floors of residential units and 5 floors of parking in each. And that's with no recreational facilities or amenities for the high-income households for whom these are intended. Clearly, this does not follow the policies of the general plan requiring conformity with the surrounding neighborhood and preserving views from Paradise Drive and for existing homeowners. There is nothing like this on the entire Marin County shoreline, and for good reason. This is just bad planning. The general plan makes no exception to divert an ephemeral stream for building purposes. The general plan also does not include a waiver of the town's environmental and view fault policies in return for the owner building low-income housing, as he suggests he might do. The general plan designated this site for 100% above moderate income housing. The proposed loophole cannot be considered when assessing the site's capacity. Given these enormous constraints, it is clear that Site H does not have developable capacity for 93 units. The ephemeral streams are an insurmountable impediment, and 4 13-story towers would be unprecedented along the Marin County shoreline. Approval for this development would be a non-starter and impossible to accomplish by January 31st, 2021.
Can you please
Sorry,
wrap up?
2020, wrapping
You're
up.
at your 3 minutes, so if you could please wrap up, thank you.
HCD will obviously realize this when they review this important report. Please listen to your constituents, visit the site in person, and reconsider your approval for Site H. Otherwise, we will, as a town, we be revisiting this issue for the next many years to come, as well as fighting in court.
Thank you for your comments.
Pardon me for reading this.
Good evening. No,
3
okay,
minutes
thank you.
of fame here.
So if you could just state your name and then we'll have 3 minutes.
I'm John Larson. I'm a 48-year Tiburon resident and taxpayer since 1975. I'm president of the Mateo Drive Homeowners Association, 17 homes located right above Site H. I'm a co-managing member of the Committee for Tiburon. We're a California LLC formed in April to represent the views of hundreds of families and people in homes who reside along Paradise Drive, whose lives would be affected in a large number of very onerous ways if Site H were included in the HE plan. We are strongly supporting Site J to replace Site A. There are at least 10 major advantages of Site J over H. I'll list them. 1, at 27 acres, it's 3 times the size of H, leaving room to build more units less densely. 2, the southern portion of the property exceeding the entire size of Site H is being offered as permanent open space. It offers superb views of the bay. Geographically, the ground is much preferred for building. 5, it could be built with an access road from Trestle Glen, eliminating additional traffic on windy, curvy Paradise Drive. 6, the town just approved Alta Robles subdivision, 14 units right below Site J. It was negligible complaint from a very few number of neighbors that would be affected compared to Site H with the hundreds of us. 7, H is served by Tiburon's own sanitary District 5 rather than Corte Madeira's District 2 for Site H. 8, there's twice the water delivery capability to fight fires on Site J with a 8-inch water main. versus the 6-inch main serving site H. This is coming from our engineering. Site J has no San Francisco Bay shoreline considerations. Site H development encroaches on or detrimentally impacts sensitive habitat areas. It'll violate a host of federal and state environmental policies. Site J has none of these problems. It sits higher up on Paradise Drive and has no bay shoreline problems with which to contend. And 10, a verified petition for writ of magnanimous. It's a legal action against Tiburon and the owner Sierra Pines. It's related to environmental consequences, which would no longer be necessary if site H could be dropped from the HE plan. It's that would be dropped immediately. Tiburon does need to present a plan to annex and pre-zone site J by the end of January. This is possible if Tiburon acts quickly. We can do it. Working together with the full support of the council and the planning staff, we can get it done in 4 months. Finally, I'm 82, I can ask this, but I have to ask the question, why is the town and our planning staff pushing so hard to accommodate Site H and one property owner who has lived here less than 4 years over the preferences and considerations of hundreds of us on our committee who have lived, many of us, over 50 years in the surrounding area? And why risk environmental pushback from the state and federal agencies when there is none for Site J? So we look forward to completing the important project together. We want to work with the town and HCD and our wonderful staff to the maximum benefit all of us and get back to our regular lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Sir, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Matt Cutler. I'm a resident of 65 Seaforth Drive, and I'm here in my capacity as president of the Seaforth Estates Association, which sits directly beneath Site J. We've recently become aware of the proposal to designate Site J as part of the town's housing element, and our community or any of the other affected property owners have not received any notification of this proposal. We request moving forward that anything going on with Site J we be made aware of, because Site J is directly uphill and across Paradise Drive from our community, and any development there would directly affect us. In particular, the California Geological Survey map unequivocally indicates direct landslide danger to the homes and families in our community. And so basically, anything that falls downhill from Site J goes right down the throat of Seaforth Road and the multiple houses and families that are there. There have been multiple concerns about Site H, which I completely appreciate, including steep slopes, impacts on wetlands and streams, landslide potential, and dangerous conditions on Paradise Drive. All of these issues also exist on the winter property Site J, except to a greater degree. The site is steeper than Site H and includes many, if not more, wetlands and streams. There are significant landslide deposits near the intersection of Trestle Glen and Paradise Drive, and large landslide deposits directly above Seaforth. Paradise Drive south of Trestle Glen is narrow and unsafe for bicyclists, as you're already aware, and in overall worse condition than north of Trestle Glen. The county has not repaved the road in more than 40 years. Critically, while Site H is downhill of Paradise Drive and drains directly into San Francisco Bay, the winter property is uphill from Paradise Drive and will drain into Seaforth and other downhill properties before reaching the bay. The county minimally maintains the existing drainage ditches and culverts on Paradise Drive, and they frequently overflow during storms. Development of the site could result in significant flooding of downhill properties, including our own. And I'd just like to end by saying this letter is not from me, but from our community. I have circulated it, and 29 of the 30 households in our association have signed on to it, including the Ayaz family, Dana Borneo, Elise Boyer, the Caminos family, the Cunningham family, the Cutler family, that's me, Margarita Dreyer, the Dooley family, the Elders family, the Gelb family, the Giannini family, the Helmholtz family, and I could keep going. You guys have this electronically. I appreciate your consideration. I know this is an incredibly difficult issue for everybody on Paradise Drive and who are affected, but we just want to register our opposition to considering Site J in the housing element plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler. Good evening. Thanks for coming.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm David Park. My family and I have lived at 23 Old Landing Road for the last decade and a half. And I understand the complexity of the situation in which the town's leaders find themselves, and I certainly appreciate the attention of the council and of my fellow Tiburon citizens. The council and staff have received a number of communications from the committee that goes into great detail with attached materials you've seen today, including, and I think this is critical, independent expert determinations regarding the Site H issue. An additional communication was sent by the Committee for Tiburon containing 2 independently commissioned engineering reports that address specific issues that really, I think, get to the heart of the buildability question. My objective is not to repeat in great detail what you've already heard, but is really to highlight a few specific points that appear relevant to the deliberations today. As you've already heard, the first compelling concern has to do with the documented and verified presence of streams, whether it's 2, 4, or 5, I'll leave up to the experts, but they're there. And compliance with existing San Francisco Bay offset restrictions would reduce the potentially buildable space on that site from slightly less than 10 acres to only about 1.5 acres. And 2 of these streams, even in mid-August, were still running. 6 existing culvert locations feed these streams after the rain, which I think is really tangible evidence of their impact. Existing Tiburon general plan conservation policy sets an unambiguous stream setback of at least 50 feet on each side of the top of the bank of any stream, including intermittent and ephemeral ones. Modification is not permitted by policy for building, but for transportation. And we're asking the town council really to recognize and honor this existing plan. These studies were paid for with the private funds of Tiburon residents concerned that several critical questions had not been adequately addressed scientifically. It's our shared response, all of us in this room, to address the science, not to simply assert that we think the site is buildable and we'll figure it out as we go along, without determining that it really is in fact buildable to full compliance at a certain capacity. As you've heard, there's concern about that other sites may exist. I'm not going to go into this. I'd like to conclude by once again expressing my appreciation and close by noting that personally, much of my career was in leading science organizations. When confronted by good science that obstructed or delayed a plan, an option was never to ignore the science. It was to critically examine and test it. If the science was sound, there were only 2 options: to acknowledge its validity or to admit that while the science was right, there were more important factors at play and own the consequences. And that's really, pardon me, what we're talking about here, which is owning the consequences. It was never to simply ignore the science and replace it with opinions made by non-experts. We've seen too much of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Park.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Stuart Scheinholz. I'm a real estate attorney and developer. I live in Paradise Cay. I don't purport to speak for the Cay, but like Tom said, we have 233 some homes. I am certain that at least 90%, if not 98% or 100% of people object to it. So you literally have hundreds of residents who disagree with this plan. So what I'm struck by this evening, and I can't go into, I don't want to go over all the details which you've been provided with, but it's more of a common sense approach. One is, what are the alternatives? The ADU idea, spread out over the town. It's not going to impact any particular neighborhood. There seems to be enthusiasm for it. There's also the benefit of people who are creating the ADUs where their relatives or guests will be able to stay there. Seems like a positive thing. The other common sense item I wanted to point out, having lived in the Cay for 15 years and having driven on Paradise Drive, multiple times every day for 15 years is what it's like to get from site H to say Trestle Glen, Trestle Glen, and then down to Tiburon Boulevard. Every time I'm on that road, the one thing that goes through my head is be careful, don't hit a cyclist. Can you imagine what it's going to be like to have cement trucks, steel trucks, contractors, laborers, all the things that would be involved in hauling material to that site to build 100 homes? It would be insane. It literally would. So as you're considering this, I hope that you'll think about the existing residents and what they want. What are the viable alternatives? And what would it really be like in the real world if all these trucks are going to go on this windy 2-lane road for a couple years? And that's how long it would take. And honestly, you also have to consider what's the likelihood that it's even going to happen, because there would be litigation. And then guess what? There wouldn't be any new housing. So I hope that you'll consider an alternative to this, because it just doesn't seem like it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scheinholz.
So I'm a 20-year resident of Tiburon and live adjacent to Paradise Drive.
And what's your name?
Susan Bowley. Thank you for reminding me. Listening to all the comments tonight, I feel the frustration of the group who've expressed their disapproval of Site H. I'm frustrated that the town officials have disregarded the public comments and disallowed sound alternatives. Site J, the Winters property, including more ADUs than allowed in the formula and that were identified as options in their own questionnaire, more units downtown, and lastly, less units for Site H, the 2 to 5 that were already zoned. I'm particularly frustrated by the Site H transportation memo included in tonight's agenda. The consultants from Sacramento, I have nothing against consultants, I was a consultant. They wrote this memo, but the residents who have lived near Paradise Drive for years have a very different experience. And you just heard the speaker before me talk about Paradise Drive is a 2-lane road with 7 blind turns and no traffic lights or stop signs or shoulders. The delivery trucks, the construction vehicles, the tree works, anytime one blocks a lane of the road, you cannot pass. You are likely facing a blind turn with no visibility to the other lane. And cars frequently speed on Paradise Drive. Over the years, we've had accidents, including cars driving off the road into a resident's home. The stretch of Paradise Drive accounted for all of the collisions along Paradise Drive that were recorded by Marin County in a survey for the 2015 Marin County Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. Another exciting phenomenon in Paradise Drive is the Maserati racetrack. Now, I have nothing against Maseratis, but we often see and hear sports cars racing on the road at high speeds, especially at night. Ask any resident who lives near Paradise, and they will cite this dangerous but long-running behavior. There's also no mention of the dozens of cyclists in this report, this memo that was written, who are drawn every day to the Paradise Loop. It's a Marin County designated bike route. It's a tourist destination. Everyday vehicles are backed up behind cyclists along the winding stretch of Paradise between Site H and Trestle Glen. We regularly see groups of 15 cyclists riding as a pack on this 2-lane road. In fact, Site H is situated on a planned section of San Francisco Bay Trail, which is a joint project of the California Metropolitan Transportation Commission and ABAG. The Bay Trail will become a continuous 500-mile bicycling and hiking path around San Francisco Bay. Paradise Drive is the only bicycle route that links Southern Marin and Tiburon to Corte Madera, Smart, and Points North. And it is part of the existing Marin County countywide bikeway network and planned Tiburon bikeway network. So situating 93 residential units will likely bring 200 more cars to Paradise Drive. That's not including the trucks and cars used for the construction process, their service vehicles, the delivery trucks, the maintenance workers, and the employees for those 93 units. All those cars will be driven on a 2-lane road with 7 hairpin turns.
Can you wrap up your remarks, please?
Thank you. I'm just about to do that. So I just would ask the town to please take the time to consider the comments that have been made by all of the hundreds of residents who've expressed them, and take the time. January, this is not January of 2024. Please ask for the 1-year extension. Do not approve the current plan tonight, and please consider extending this discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Is there anyone else in chambers who'd like to speak? Please.
Good evening.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you, members of the town council. My name is Cynthia Matty Kim. I'll try to make this short. I know a lot of the points were already discussed, but I just want to reemphasize. My husband and I live in Paradise K, and we strongly oppose the inclusion of Site H in the town's housing element plan. The windy roads and safety of the community, plus the lack of infrastructure along Paradise Drive, are just a few obvious reasons why Site H is not suitable for high-density housing. Now there's new information about the lot itself. The town has identified potential landslides, and the presence of the ephemeral streams that spread across Site H leaves insufficient space to build 93 units. It's really hard to believe that Site H will continue to be in the plan, as the town's own policies from the general plan prohibit the development of housing units within 100 feet of any stream. Yesterday, we submitted a letter with photos and video links for your review of what our community down by the water sees during wet weather. Even with 3 inches of rain, these streams pour down with strong intensity. So much erosion has occurred by the shoreline, and debris and bricks slide into the bay from these exact streams. Also, the town council decided to delay the zoning of Site H while urging the town staff to partner with the community to provide other alternatives. We, the community, did what you asked us to do, which was to provide enough ADUs, an option that could substitute units for Site H, downtown, and the Reed School. So I ask you tonight why these options are not being fully explored after the work was done. And these potential ADU options can benefit everyone here in Tiburon, not just the ones that live by Paradise Drive, not just downtown, but everyone. Please please exclude and do not move forward with Site H. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Messerschmidt. Is there anybody else in the chambers who'd like to speak tonight, or can I go on? Oh, one more, okay. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Eric Crandall. I'm the owner of the property at 4576 Paradise Drive. I wanted to start by congratulating Councilmember Nick Farr on the election win and thanking all of you for your service. I did want to clarify that my family's lived on Paradise Drive since the 1950s. I was essentially born and raised, and while I did buy this property 4 years ago, I am basically a lifelong Paradise Drive resident. I submitted an extensive comment today, including some history of my ownership of the site, as well as multiple site-specific studies done by experts documenting the actual conditions on the site. These reports contradict nearly all the claims being made, including the ones about fire flow. That's really all I have to say, and I'm available to answer any questions if you have any for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crandall. Is there anybody else in the chambers who'd like to speak tonight? So seeing none, Madam Clerk, is there anybody online who'd like to speak on this agenda item?
Yes, I'll recognize Julie Jacobs.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you. Mayor Ryan and members of Town Council, my name is Julie Jacobs, and my husband and I respectfully urge you to adopt the revised housing element, including Parcel H, and submit it for approval as soon as possible to the Department of Housing and Community Development. This revised housing element is a culmination of almost 3 years of work, of many discussions and correspondence with HCD to achieve certification, which would end Tiburon's vulnerability to the punitive builder's remedy applications. Builder's remedy applications are subject to only ministerial local review. Our town council is in a very difficult position, created by the state's RHNA allocation of 639 additional housing units for Tiburon derived from the erroneous description of downtown as a transportation hub. Tiburon challenged this high number unsuccessfully, as have other California communities. There are safety and environmental issues with all of the sites under consideration for high-density housing under the RHNA allocation. Downtown safety issues are the most serious of all, with housing element sites in liquefaction, flood, and tsunami zones, and adjacent to wildland-urban interface with associated wildfire risks. It is only possible to reach Highway 101 via miles of two-lane wide Tiburon Boulevard or Paradise Drive. The potential for a Lahaina or Paradise, California type of tragedy in the case of an emergency requiring evacuation is obvious. Emergency vehicle access is also at risk. Traffic is already gridlocked at times each day without the addition of new units. This is not the case on Paradise Drive. Removing the units slated for parcel H in the revised housing element and placing them downtown in addition to the 400 units planned for downtown would greatly increase the danger and ignore the feedback we've received from HCD to spread new housing throughout town. We hear and understand the concerns of our friends and neighbors near parcel H. We also understand the concerns of residents near parcel J. We are very concerned for them and for all Tiburon residents that if we do not achieve certification of our housing element now, we may end up with builders' remedy applications for much higher density development than what is currently contemplated for the housing element sites that they are trying to protect. For all of these reasons, we ask you to approve and submit the revised housing element to HCD now. We also request that if HCD should accept Site J and or greater numbers of ADUs in our housing element, that those units be used to reduce the number of units slated for downtown sites where the vast majority of the RHNA sites are located,
Ms. Jenkins, could you wrap up because your time is up?
rather than removing Site H. Thank you very much for your hard work and leadership.
Thank you. Before we go on, just so you know, some people who you may have agreed with were afforded a little bit more than 3 minutes. So please be respectful. And I am aware of the time. I will try to limit people to 3 minutes, but it's not necessarily helpful when you tell me that time is up when other people that you agreed with took more than 3 minutes, even though this person may disagree with you. Thank you. Madam Clerk, do you have anybody else?
Next is Jenny Silva.
Hi, my name's Jenny Silva, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Campaign for Fair Housing Elements and also as the board chair of the Marin Environmental Housing Collaborative. And I am calling in to support the draft housing element as proposed by the staff, including Site H. And obviously there is great opposition to Site H. However, this opposition does not warrant a change to the staff's proposed element. It appears likely that the constraints that have been raised are addressable, and the concerns raised for Site H are the same complaints that are raised against every other site that is proposed for housing, traffic, fire, environment. Replacing Site H with Site J or downtown is not going to make the housing element any more popular. It will just be a different group of people opposing it. Removing Site H and increasing the number of ADUs is a bad idea. Listening to the testimony, it would be easy to believe that Tiburon does not have ADUs on its housing element, but it does. The original element submitted included ADUs up to the number that HCD allows. HCD is very unlikely to accept additional ADUs. Belvedere and a number of other Bay Area jurisdictions have tried the ADU strategy that the Committee for Tiburon is advocating, going out and soliciting letters of interest. HCD has not accepted these plans. Even with the current ADU count in the housing element, HCD asked the town to strengthen its programs to get those ADUs built. It's not going to allow a doubling of ADUs or a huge increase in them. The reason we have these high RHNAs is that we are in a housing crisis. We see this every day when schools are unable to hire staff, families are unable to hire caretakers, and businesses cannot fill open positions. The ADUs are a very poor way to address our housing crisis. Few of the ADUs built in Tiburon will be used for housing in the short term. It is very hard to enforce fair housing laws with ADUs. Even when rented, ADUs are rarely made available to members of vulnerable populations. In terms of disruption to the community, an ADU strategy is far more disruptive than a 90-unit development. Building a single development of housing is a single development of 90 units is much more efficient than 90 individual projects, each requiring its own architect, construction crew, and so forth. And just in terms of the traffic concerns, redistributing the housing throughout Tiburon does not alleviate any of the driving on Tiburon Drive. And I would encourage Tiburon to look at ways to reduce car dependency as a method of reducing traffic rather than shuffling units around. And with that, my time is up. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Silva. We have more.
Peter Kraus.
Thanks.
Good evening, Town Council.
Good
Can
evening,
you
Mr.
hear me?
Prowse. Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Thank you. My name is Peter Prowse. I am the attorney for the Committee to Preserve the Paradise Cove Salt Marsh, Tidelands, and Neighborhood Safety. The only realistic way for the town to avoid the builder's remedy come January 2024 is to ditch reliance on Site H and to pursue an alternative such as ADUs, which the council asked for in July and the committee has presented to you now, and self-certify an alternative housing element. HCD's concern about adding more ADUs to the housing element, given the demonstrated expressions of interest by hundreds of Tiburon residents, is unfounded in the law and should not be an obstacle to Tiburon's self-certification of its housing element, with that alternative included. The Site H approach is not going to avoid the builder's remedy. Tiburon is currently being sued by my client over Tiburon's reliance on Site H in its housing element, and HCD has repeatedly rejected Site H. We expect that lawsuit to succeed and for HCD to continue to reject Site H. HCD had concerns over the capacity of the site to support 93 units given its wetland and stream constraints and its water and fire capacity and lack thereof. None of the revisions before you tonight address HCD's concerns, and it's easy to see why. Where are 93 or more units going to be built on this property? Most of the site is unbuildable, even if there are just 2 streams on the site, as staff and the property owner are telling you, given the general plans required 100-foot buffers. When you add in those buffers, there's no room for 93 units, unless you're talking about building tall towers. And if that's what you're doing, let's be clear about that. Nor have staff answered any of HCD's questions about whether there is adequate water or fire capacity to service this large development. Staff tell you in their report that HCD has given its blessing to these revisions, but that's not true. State agencies don't give pre-approvals precisely because they can be misrepresented. I asked the HCD staff whether they had given their blessing, and they told me directly that they had not. We do not expect these revisions to satisfy HCD this time around either. HCD had concerns about fire service to the site, which you heard about back in May, and staff have done nothing to address those concerns. Why isn't the fire marshal here to assure you that those concerns have been addressed? Has staff even spoken with the fire marshal? They hadn't as of the planning commission meeting. With all due respect to the town's attorney, we also expect to succeed in our suit. The revisions to the housing element actually bolster the claims in our CEQA suit. Those changes introduce direct new contradictions to your EIR, acknowledging significant environmental impact where the EIR found none. They also expose new aesthetic impacts over the status quo. We expect the court to order the town to prepare a new EIR and pay my attorney fees, a significant and expensive delay to the town. We ask you to finally settle on a defensible and timely alternative to the Site H approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prowse. Do we have more speakers?
Mike Potler.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and yes, welcome.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to address the council and for those participants in person and those also on the Zoom call. I just want to personalize the objection of Site J I live in Seaforth. My house backs up to Paradise. I'm at the top corner of Seaforth Road in Paradise. I have a creek that runs down past my house on two sides, comes straight down the hill. So if you look at that map that was presented earlier in the materials, the yellow section, my house is one with the big old bullseye on it. Okay. My house is 65 years old. I've lived in this house for 23 years. And for us to approve a density development on Site J requires lots of study to see how water's going to flow off that hill, how landslide protection is going to be made in order to make that a buildable lot. So I just wanted to personalize that several people have spoken today about throwing in at the last minute an alternative of switching from Site H to Site J. And I'm sure if we would have had more notice about this meeting and that alternative, we would have had a more organized objection to give you. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Anybody else?
Carmela Davis.
Hello.
Hi, Ms. Davis.
My name is Carmela Davis. I grew up in Marin County and went to school at Tamalpais High School. And I am a recent college graduate, and I urge you to pass the housing element, including Site H. My generation has been pushed out of Marin. There is no feasible way for us to come and move back. Marin is in a housing crisis. I don't know a single teacher that I grew up with that was able to live in our county. I think that Tiburon, including Site H, is a great step forward. I've heard today commentary about ADUs, but there is no proper regulations on ADUs to impose that is actually rented to people, and it won't just turn into sheds, home offices, yoga studios, or just for family members. And some of the opponents to Site H don't seem to be very credible in what they're saying. There's proposed building that's been approved in San Rafael, such as 1515 4th Street, which is 162 units on less than 1 acre, and that's only 8 stories tall. So the commentary that this 9-acre, 92-unit project would be 13 stories tall is simply made up. It would not be that tall. This is not even necessarily considered high density housing, but it is housing that's needed. And while there are environmental concerns, the best way to create sustainable housing is to build up, not build out. And HCD has never stated that Site H is unbuildable, like a previous commenter has stated. HCD has only said that they want comments on the record to address concerns and to hear more information about it. And with that, I want to thank staff and everyone involved in this housing element and urge you all to move it forward with Site H.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Do we have anyone else who'd like to speak?
Robert Wolfson.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm also a resident of Paradise K, and like the others have said very eloquently, there are many reasons why Site H is a very inappropriate place to build 93 units. I think any of you that have been out there, I don't know if you have, you can see that it's just wildly inappropriate and out of keeping with the nature of the neighborhood. It's just to me, it's just a crazy idea. I do understand that you have to come up with 639 units, and I sympathize with that challenge that you have. But it's to just go against the wishes of like 90% of the people who live there is kind of outrageous, really. And when there are some alternatives that have been discussed tonight, I do think that the ADUs is a great way to go. Many homeowners have dreamed of the time when they could actually put in a second unit and not have it be denied by the city. As you know, generally in most cities and most towns, it has been extremely difficult to add a unit to your house. So, I mean, understandably, there are many people that want to do it. And so, I mean, that would be a very good solution to the problem. At the very least, it seems to me that because there is so much controversy and so many different opinions about Site H, that asking for this extension makes a lot of sense to me. And certainly I would just be shocked if you guys just go ahead and approve Site H tonight at this meeting when you see the incredible opposition. I mean, I can't say exactly it's undemocratic. Obviously, democracy has to do with the entire town, but you have a situation here of so much united opposition that it would seem to me it's just not right for you guys to go ahead and approve it in light of all this opposition. And by the way, on another note, I've been living in Paradise Cay for 9 years. I never heard about anything about Site H until a couple of months ago when I heard about it from a neighbor. So I don't know what you guys were doing to alert people to this possibility, but I certainly only became aware of it a couple of months ago, or I would have been more active about the issue a long time ago. So, okay, that's what I wanted to tell you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfson. Do we have any other speakers?
No further comment.
Okay, so I'll close public comment period at this time, and I'll bring it back to the council for discussion.
Can I just ask a staff question?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Why, if we were to extend the deadline, the purpose would be to adopt Site H and Site J and some kind of data based on the ADU survey. I'm not sure what other purposes there would be for extending the deadline.
If I may, Vice Mayor Fredericks, members of the council, just to be clear, the information that was included in your staff report talks about requesting an extension or making findings to support an extension of the time to do the rezoning for Site H. So Site H currently exists in your housing element, and you've already taken some steps to adopt the rezonings that are necessary to provide the RHNA capacity. You did that in June and they became effective in July. So those were the rezonings for the downtown sites and some of the other rezonings that were necessary. The town council decided to defer taking action related to Site H. Site H is currently in your housing element. It's on your site's inventory, and there's a program to rezone that site by January 31st, 2024. And the information included in your staff report was put in there in kind of response to a public comment that was received indicating that the town should do that. So we just wanted to be clear, it's not an extension for adopting your housing element. It's an extension for adopting rezonings that are statutorily required to provide the capacity to meet your RHNA.
So it's for zoning, because one of the commentators seemed to package it as an extension to adopt Site J and some of the ADUs. And if we were going to do that, we wouldn't need to extend the deadline.
If the council wanted to substitute a different site for Site H currently is in your housing element. If the council direction was, we would like to replace that with some other site or some other sites or another alternative to meeting the 93 above mod units, you would have to give us that direction tonight. Revisions would need to be made to the housing element to incorporate that direction. And it's likely not just a plug and play. Need to be some analysis that goes into that consideration. And then that would have to be submitted to HCD for their consideration.
So my question is, I'm going somewhere with this. Would that require us extending the deadline for zoning? It would.
Well, it would depend on what you're rezoning at that point. So if I'm understanding your question, Vice Mayor Fredericks.
It's really simple. It's why on earth would we extend the deadline?
But that's not a legal question, that's a policy question. There's no reason I can think of to do it.
And the only reason it became a legal question is because Nina deferred to Mary. So it seems like as a matter of policy, there's no reason to do it. And the downside of doing it, if there were a legal reason to do it, is that it just extends the period of time that we're subject to the builder's remedy. Is that right?
So the city currently has an adopted housing element, and you made the, I'm going to put air quotes up, self-certification findings that are allowed under the government code. You made the determinations of the revisions that were put into the housing element to respond to HCD's findings from the letter that you had in front of you in May. So currently there's a defense to any builder's remedy project that you have an adopted housing element. As we've discussed, you know, that there's an open question of law as to how that would be treated. And in fact, Southern California cases are progressing now that may answer that question. So, you know, to answer your question, it somewhat depends. You know, we're in a world right now where you have an adopted housing element, you have a defense to a builder's remedy project.
But it is a potential risk, even though we don't know the outcome.
Correct. And, you know, another risk, just to fully answer your question about the zoning timing. If you did not get some extension or make the findings in order to justify an extension of time, if you had a certified housing element and your rezonings are not done by the statutory deadline, that element could be decertified by HCD. And if you don't have a certified housing element by the time your rezonings are due, HCD will not certify your housing element until those rezonings are complete.
Thank you.
So if nobody else has any comments to start, I'm going to do is I'm going to just run through my take on some of the public comments that we received, especially here tonight. Because I thought some of the questions and observations were quite keen. You know, the very first speaker, and I apologize, I didn't get your name, but you know, you said, what is being approved, right? And it's a great question. You know, we need to comport with state law and have a housing element certified that allows rezoning for 639 more units. We need to get that approved by them. So a lot of the comment here tonight has come from depths of expertise that I will never match. And I say this with all due respect, but like HCD is the one that has to opine on the suitability of this site and the effectiveness of our housing element. I don't think the five of us here are going to talk about necessarily the suitability of H, except to the extent that we believe or not that HCD believes that that site H is a suitable site. So the problem when I think of it as a problem solving exercise is I need to come up with the best housing element for the whole town that HCD will approve. And I can't ignore that last clause because that's part of the problem that we need to solve. And so I'm going to circle back to the ADU question. I know a lot of you have raised it and I appreciate the surveys. And I think that will be very powerful with no net loss provisions going forward. But we have never in all of our conversations with HCD gotten any indication that they are willing to approve more than our current production rate of ADUs, despite the fact that I believe they know we've done the survey. They have not given us that indication and they've had plenty of opportunity to do it. Mr. Prowse talked about how, you know, I think a bunch of speakers actually have talked about it in the emails and in the speakers, how HCD keeps rejecting site H, but then Mr. Prowse also said HCD doesn't give pre-approval. Well, they also don't give pre-rejection. Like this is a conversation and a negotiation trying to come up with sites that work. And we don't have a lot of sites here. And so we've been having conversations with HCD, or staff has, based on the direction that we've given to them. And so we have to make decisions based on what we hear from those conversations. And so, you know, again, there's the ADU issue has never been seized upon by HCD as like, oh, there's your path to a solution. Sounds great. Because from my perspective, I love it. I supported the survey. I think ultimately it's very virtuous for the town in terms of spreading density. I see the appeal of it, but if HCD won't approve it, it's just, it's pointless for us to consider it. And then the last thing I'll come back to is site J. And I do not see site J as a path forward in this problem solving exercise, because whatever what we know is how it compares favorably to site H in some people's opinions, and they're experts, but nonetheless, it's their opinion. In some elements, site J compares favorably to site H in this subset of ways. But what we don't know is what ways site J will fail when the same number of people take the playbook that site H opponents have shown them and run it against site J. And it will happen, and it will just be the same thing over again. It may not be ephemeral streams, but it'll be landslides, it'll be red-legged frogs, whatever it is, it's not solving the town's problem. And we need to solve the town's problem. And the problem is getting a certified ACD. So, and by the way, I have said this to people, any opponents of site H who've met with me beginning last April, I've told people my objection to site J, and it was exactly that. It was just that it hasn't been attacked yet, but it will. Site K will be attacked, site L will be attacked. Whatever we keep saying is the next best thing, it'll only be the next best thing until the armada of experts that live near it come out. And I know it sounds like I'm being super critical, but I really respect all the initiatives that you put in. And it kind of brings me back to my initial point. HCD is going to approve the suitability of this site, and they have all the material that you've submitted. They literally have hundreds of pages of documents that opponents to site H have submitted. So they are in the position to make this determination. We just have to give them the authority to go forward and approve it or not. If they don't, we'll move on to plan, insert letter here, but we will pivot. And this is just me speaking, obviously. I'm not saying that anyone else shares these opinions, but these are the way that I've analyzed my approach to either trying to find a site better than H or to moving forward with H. I'm done. Yes.
And I can say that I adopt your analysis, and I'd like to make a few more comments. I know there's sort of disbelief and discontent that this is not a matter that the public votes on, and we are required to follow the vote. We are all under the thumb of the new state laws that prescribe what we are supposed to do with respect to providing housing, and under the thumb of the Housing Community Development, which is a state agency that makes the determinations of what is acceptable, as the mayor just described. For us, the neighborhoods from downtown, Old Landing Road, Paradise K, Seaforth are all, and downtown again, are all affected by the build out of all the proposed sites considered to meet the mandates. We've heard those concerns, we share those concerns, and they're all valued, but many of them conflict. It's, as I said to my colleagues tonight, it's almost like a circular firing squad. The EIR, with the staff's proposed amendments, really adequately address the program of supporting ADUs, rezoning for higher densities, both in downtown and, as indicated in the amendments, proposing a site H. Site J is in the county. The mayor described some of the constraints and how we decide which expert shapes our decisions. To adopt it delays certification with all those attending risks. The county did not even include that site in its own housing element update. It's in the county. And that is consistent with the identified constraints to building there. I believe the town and the council and the community have done due diligence in responding to HCD and responding, especially the staff responding to neighbor demands to investigate the willingness to build ADUs, to build ADUs. You know, part of the problem is, given the history among town residents of building ADUs, Even the current housing element draft relying on 72 ADUs, although accepted, or seemingly accepted, we don't have an official word, we just don't have an objection from HCD. They're really not a panacea. They don't always provide housing. They burden neighbors who will be scattered, but they'll be neighbors with structures that can be built into existing setbacks. They're not even required to provide on-site parking. And those cars will all end up on Tiburon Boulevard or Paradise Drive, no matter what neighborhood they're built in. They do serve a purpose, and the proposed willingness to build gives us, as I think has been pointed out, a no net loss capacity, backfilling if we don't build what we are saying we're zoning for. Also, they have the capacity to give us a reserve because the housing element is reassessed every 8 years. Every 8 years, and if we have not built what we said we were going to build because of constraints or the economy or whatever, having ADUs in reserve gives us the capacity to meet the next cycle of housing demands that will be made on us unless we band together and push back on the state laws. Yeah, so to reduce the risks that we're all worried about and comply with the requirements of having a certified housing element and required zoning, I do support approval of the proposed resolution, adoption of the amendments with direction to staff to file the necessary papers to advance certification of our housing element in the most expeditious way possible.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Are there other comments? Councilman Wellner, sure.
Yeah, so first I'd like to start by making just an observation about the comments we've received tonight. You know, we've been now at this for, I don't know, well over a year, and we've been learning, and clearly the residents of Tiburon have been learning. I was struck tonight by how thoughtful and impressive so many of these comments were, regardless of the viewpoint that were being presented. You know, a lot of non-lawyers spoke like very well educated lawyers tonight. And not only that, but I think just about every argument that I have heard expressed to me or thought of was expressed by someone. I think the issue were very well covered. I would, and I just felt like I should do this tonight. I just want to call out in particular 3 speakers who I thought made very thoughtful presentations: Julie Jacobs, Jenny Silva, and then I'm sorry I missed the first name, but Miss Davis, who spoke towards the end, raised, I thought, very thoughtful perspectives. I want to go back quickly to first principles here. This is where we're at. 639 units is too many for Tiburon, but we have to come up with a place to put them. In my view, downtown has given more than its share in contributing to these units. It's more than 400. Do we have the number offhand? Okay, it's the vast majority of homes are downtown. And downtown, I just have to emphasize this. Downtown isn't just the people who live there. Downtown is for all of us. Downtown is Tiburon. And we cannot shoehorn all of these sites downtown. Already the idea of putting these additional 300 or these additional 3-story multifamily units up and down the side of Tiburon Boulevard as you approach Main Street, you know, has many of us fearing and concerned that we won't be able to recognize our own town, you know, in 10 years. A lot of thoughtful work went into designing standards for the development downtown to make it as village-like as possible, to try and preserve the character of the town we love. But it is maxed out. I cannot approve going above 3 stories. And so that means we have to find other sites. And then, you know, just to quickly, I think that the main question I think needs to be answered, and I'll talk about it briefly, is how to handle ADUs. I think the mayor and vice mayor both very eloquently talked about Site J, how the same issues that we are seeing at any given spot are going to emerge for any new spot that is picked. I was especially impressed by the speaker who represented the community next to Site J, raising, you know, the fact that many of these same issues are going to plague a proposal from that site. And the fact of the matter is not a part of Tiburon yet. And so the idea that we would be able to annex a site with probably the same types of issues as the proposed Site H, get permission from the owner to develop it and somehow use that to replace what's happening at Site H doesn't seem to me remotely realistic. With regard to ADUs, here's what I believe. HCD is looking at proposals from every community up and down the state. Every community wants to decrease the amount of housing that they need to identify for densely developed units. Everyone is proposing ADUs, and HCD has taken an approach that they're going to use historic levels of ADUs in order to determine what future ADUs are likely to be created. In order for us to be able to convince HCD that the proposed levels of ADUs resulting from a survey are realistic, they need to believe not only that the numbers are realistic, but they also need to believe that those ADUs will be used to rent to new families instead of to be used as additional amenities for existing families who already live there, which is I think a very tough thing to convince them of. And more than that, whatever standard that they approve for us is going to be applied statewide. So basically, they're not doing a one-off for Tiburon. If they accept numbers based on a survey for Tiburon, they're going to have to accept it for everyone, and it's going to dramatically reduce the number of designated multifamily housing projects that get proposed. I simply don't believe HCD will do that. You know, I think we can and should promote the development of ADUs for housing. If anything close to what is, you know, suggested by the survey results comes to pass, then it will reduce pressure on the rest of the town to have to keep building or replacing sites that don't get built. But I don't believe HCD is going to accept a housing proposal that takes away Site H and replaces it with a promise of potentially new ADUs that might be rented to new families. So I think that is a recipe for resubmitting a housing element that gets bounced back and causes us to miss our deadline, be vulnerable to builders remedy projects, and be back at square one once again. So in my view, the best way to protect the town and the best way to deal with this unfair and unrealistic growth requirement, which, by the way, I've said this before, but I think it's astonishing that the number of units being required is a mandated increase in density of the town or size of the town by 16% over the next few years, which is just an incredible command level of development. I think the best way to protect the town is to submit the housing element as currently revised. I believe that HCD will accept it. And then to the extent that we can identify ways to open up new sites or identify mitigating factors, if perhaps suddenly the owner of the cove changes its mind, or other sites become available, we could seek to amend our housing element. But I think it's very important for us to act responsibly, get our certification from HCD, and get on with the business of being in compliance. So that's my view.
Thank you. Councilmember Thury, you were writing furiously. Do you want to speak or do you want? Okay.
I first wanted to, my colleagues have pretty much said a lot. And I first want to start with all of the members of the public that have spoken tonight. Well, no, actually, first I'm going to start with staff. I do want to thank our staff. I'm going to call out one staff member, but that doesn't mean I'm not calling out our attorney and our consultants as well. But our community development director, Dina Tassani, has been doing this for 3 years now. And I think she dreams about housing elements. And I do want to thank her for the work she's done to bring us here today. So I want to start with that. And then I really want to start, and I do want to thank everybody else. Sorry, I just don't want to name everybody. And then I also want to talk to all of the members of the public. You know, everything that you've talked about tonight has helped inform our decision. And when I think it was my colleague, Councilmember Wellner, said that, you know, every single speaker sounded like, I mean, I thought you were all lawyers, actually. I mean, it was amazing hearing everybody speak. And I was not quite, I was very, very impressed with everything that was said. I am going to talk about one comment. I believe it was Beth Gassel, is that right? And you talked about wasting your summer doing the ADU survey, and all of your time is not a waste. You know, we will be able to use the ADUs for no net loss. We will be able to use ADUs in the future. There may be a way that, you know, at some point the housing element can be amended. And I'm very excited about the ADUs and about the surveys that were done. And I do want to thank you very much for that work. I believe that this is one of those decisions that, you know, my father, before he died, said, you know, whenever you make a decision, whenever you take a vote, you know, you're going to lose half the room. I think this is one of those decisions where I'll lose the entire room by any vote I take tonight. And I don't really want to vote. Do I have to vote, legal counsel? But seriously, you know, this is a state created mandate. The state said, oh, Tiburon, just because you have a ferry, you're a transit rich area. So you get 639 units of housing, which is, I think we had 72 before. Is that right? We had 72 before. So we are going from 72 units of affordable housing, which we could not build. And let me tell you, I am in favor of affordable housing. I want to see, you know, Tiburon to be more affordable to people moving into the young woman who just graduated and talked about her dream of living back here, to teachers, firefighters, police. We have a huge problem here where the people that work here cannot afford to live here. They can't pay for $5 million homes. I can't pay for that either. Anyway, but you know, our problem is that we have to respond to an unrealistic state mandate. And I don't think there's anyone in this room that wouldn't want to build affordable housing. The issue is where, and everyone says, I don't want it anywhere, really, is what we're hearing. you know, that we're not the only city or town that is trying to get a housing element qualified by HCD. And what we are seeing is that my dream of saying, well, you know, because I want to make everybody happy. I want everyone to love me. I say, well, why don't we just take the ADUs and put them in place, right? And these are questions that I've asked, and the state is not allowing it. They're saying, well, Tiburon, you built how many ADU units did we build last time?
How many? Six?
Averaging 60.
Averaging 6 a year.
Okay, so we average 6 a year. So, you know, they're going to take that and then they're going to say, okay, you did, 40 or 50 units. And how many of those are rented? And then they're going to cut us down. So they're going to take the 263 or the whatever number you want to use. And they're doing it to, places all over the place right now, other towns and cities that are trying to get their housing elements approved. So I will also talk about some other things that wherever there's building in Tiburon. So I'm not going to talk about specific sites. I'm going to say wherever, let's say some of these units actually get built. We are going to work with you, whether you're a Tiburon resident or not a Tiburon resident, to make sure that some of the impacts that have been identified are going to be mitigated. We're not going to let there be an area. Well, you can laugh at me, but I will tell you that I will work with you, even if you do laugh at me, and we will do whatever. Well, maybe it was someone else. You what? Okay. Well, I can't. Can you just? I can't have a conversation.
Sorry, this isn't the time for conversation. Sorry.
Okay.
I understand.
Yeah. Okay. You could call me out and say whatever you want, but I'm going to continue. And I showed everyone great respect here, so I'll ask for that respect back. And you're right, I did ask a question that I should have never asked. But let's move on. And I just want to say that all of your work and all of your effort is not for nothing. We have read every single letter. We have gone out and done surveys with you. But we are not just going to let building happen and let the impacts happen without mitigating those impacts. So, there were a lot of other things that we had to do to spread out the housing and to keep a 3-story limit in downtown Tiburon. The way that I come down on it is that I'm very concerned about the builder's remedy, even if we self-certify as we did. I'm worried about that. So I will be voting yes and disappointing everybody. But I want to tell you to stick with us. We're not going to leave you out there no matter what happens. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Nickfar, do you want to speak, or are you still digesting the subject matter, all 3 hours of it, Dave?
I'll say a couple of comments. I want to echo the thank you to town staff for doing all this work to submit and take back and talk to HCD, et cetera, and get us to where we are right now. I also want to thank community members for coming out. I mean, there's a groundswell of folks that are very passionate about this issue and making sure that the impact is minimized as much as possible for everyone. I think I think there are some things that need to be taken into account, I think, by everyone. I think 60 to 68% of the housing being designated for downtown is pretty significant. And I think there's going to be a really big impact. And I don't think that folks here today have talked enough about what I think the impact of that is going to be. It's going to be very significant for us, and it's going to impact traffic. It's going to impact us in a lot of different ways. And that wasn't brought up as much today. I think this whole effort, if you take a step back from whether or not it's impacting your neighborhood or a different neighborhood, I think the town council is really trying to restore local control in all this because it was taken away from us. And I think the larger effort here is we're trying to make sure that this state mandate is fulfilled in a way that we can get control back into Tiburon, and that so we can, approve building based off of our design standards, based off of other things that are again back within our local control. So I would say, to folks here and folks listening in or watching this recording later on, also bear that in mind. I think the objective here is again to get control back to Tiburon. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Well, I just want to circle back on one thing, and it was actually Mr. Scheinholz talked, and he started out saying, let's get to common sense. And this whole process has bugged me so much, because basically when you look at the HCD or the arena process, it says suspend common sense here. And it's just super frustrating to, think about things in a common sense perspective and then have this, have beef sort of forced into this corner in terms of decision making that resonates with nobody in town. So I know that's not much of a salve to hear, but nonetheless, that's how I think all of us have felt for the last year and a half up here. To move forward, we do need a motion and a second. Does anybody want to make a motion to receive the staff report and adopt a resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain?
I'm going to abstain from voting on this.
Okay, so that passes 4-0-1. Thank you. So that concludes our published agenda. Do we have any town manager reports?
Nothing, no major reports. I do want to remind council that I will be out of the office starting tomorrow and all next week, returning to town hall on October 2nd.
Thanks. Do we have any town council reports? The only thing I want to say as you leave, I really thank you for being engaged and respectful. And whether it went the way you hoped or not, I really appreciate your involvement in the process. And it's particularly notable given the comments that we heard earlier in the meeting from people who came full of hate to disrupt the meeting. And so this was a really nice counterpoint. And the only thing I'll say about those comments from earlier is it definitely serves as a warning to us that you can never be complacent about hate, because it just never goes away. And so as much as I abhor hearing that stuff, sometimes you hear it to remind yourself that it's out there, and you just can't, you're not passing performative resolutions to say, we won't tolerate anti-Semitism or anti-hate or anti-racism. Like they mean something, and you say them because you mean them. And so sometimes those kinds of reminders are healthy. So thank you for bearing with us through the process. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Thier.
I just wanted to ask, like, right now is the League of California Cities annual meeting, and our meeting always conflicts with that. So I wanted to ask if in future years we could try to schedule the town council meeting around the League of California Cities meeting so that we could go. And for those of you who don't know, it's the professional organization that all of the council members and mayors and go, and there's a lot of professional education and other things that happen there, and it's happening then. So
thank you for that.
I will point out that we do have an opportunity to attend part of it. I think it's 3 days long.
Okay. Thank you all. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Good night.